Well, Father Brown, honored to have you back on the show. How you been?
I'm on top of the world. Things are good. Things are really good. The school year is starting, and it's my favorite thing in the world is to have a bunch of high school students here at Jesuit High School working hard, getting through the year.
How long you been here?
I've been here since the fall of 2012. I've been at Jesuit High School. I took 1 year away during a period that they call tertianship. The Jesuits make you go and get an extra year of formation, and I spent that year in Ireland and Iraq, and then came right back to the same place that I was. So.
Wow. Okay. And you've been all over the world as a Jesuit then?
The Jesuits tend to do that. Yeah, they tend to do that. The Jesuits are everywhere, and so the Jesuits want every Jesuit to have some experience of the worldwide Society of Jesus. The Jesuits, a sense of the larger mission that we're all on. So
now, Father Brown, I'm pretty sure you know when you say the Jesuits are everywhere, you just confirmed confirmed every conspiracy theorist out there about the Jesuits.
Right. So there are I think a little over 16,000 Jesuits worldwide. So we really are everywhere, and it's a great thing to know that just about anywhere that I go, I'm going to run into a Jesuit somewhere. So.
Is that right? Wow. So Iraq, what was that like, by the way?
So Iraq, I was working in a refugee camp right about the time that ISIS was, the tide was beginning to turn against ISIS. So this is 2017-ish, 2016, 2017. And it was amazing. Some of the best Christians in the world are out there. So
wow,
I loved it.
Did you learn Arabic?
Did I learn Arabic? I learned how to say, Shai harla asukar shukran, like
shukran, yeah.
Yeah, so I learned how to say, I'd like some hot tea without sugar, please, things like this. So, mashallah.
Mashallah. What was the liturgy like there?
Oh yeah, so that's really amazing. I was mostly around Syriac Catholics,
okay.
Right? There were some Chaldean Catholics, but I was mostly around Syriac Catholics, which is a Petrine rite, I think. There were a lot of similarities to the Latin rite, and then a lot of things I was just hanging in there by the skin of my teeth. So
any Eastern Catholics that you ran into there?
So yeah, those Syriac Catholics are all Eastern Catholics. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at one point the Syriac were. You'd have to look this up, but I think at one point they were Nestorian, and then they came back. So.
Yeah, wow. So that's fascinating. Yeah, but that was an eye-opening experience.
Definitely, especially to see what it's like for Christians to be persecuted, right? To have their lives threatened for being Christians is it does something for the faith, right? I think our faith is built around that very concept. And so to be around Christians who had that same spirit as those early Christians who must have been hiding from the Roman authorities and from everybody else, that's really a powerful thing to see our faith come alive in the way that it was, I don't want to say in the way that it was intended, but in its natural environment,
What was the thing that stood out the most to you? Any particular story that comes to mind?
Oh, I have so many stories from when I was out there. I'll tell you one real quick. I was at the Easter liturgy that they had there, and I was participating to the best that I could in the liturgy. It was all in a language that I didn't understand. But you can catch on to what parts of the Mass you're in when they're saying Cadusa, Cadusa, Cadusa. They're saying Holy, 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 things like this. So at the end of the liturgy, I walk out of the makeshift church they had set up in the refugee camp there, and I beelined it straight to the Peshmerga guard, right, who had been watching us, because you watch on the news and you often hear of these terrible things that happen, bombings, things like that often happen at Easter liturgies. So we had gotten through our liturgy and nothing bad had happened. So I beelined it over to to sort of the head of the Peshmerga guard that were there. So he would be a Kurdish Muslim that was there, and he didn't speak much English. But I walked over there and I immediately told him, "Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping us safe." And everybody's singing these songs about the resurrection, the resurrection, the resurrection. And he pulls out his phone and he starts showing me photographs of dead ISIS people, that he had loaded up his phone with photographs, wartime photographs, and sort of was like showing off this is what happens when people mess with the Kurdish guard, this is what happens when they mess with you in war. And I just remember thinking the juxtaposition of hearing these songs that I know are about the resurrection, and seeing it right in the middle of the context of a very ugly, ugly battle. And what an amazing thing that was that made those the songs about the resurrection just stick out that much more as true and real, you know?
I imagine that's a life-changing experience.
It was for me. It certainly was for me. It changed the way that I pray a little bit. It changed the way that I think about what my life is good for. You know, it changed a little bit for me. It made me more indifferent to whatever might happen, right? So, and indifferent in a very holy way, right? In a good way. Not that I don't care, but that I recognize that God might call any of us to a difficult life, sure. And to be able to say yes to that, because I was right there to experience all these other Catholics, these other Christians that were living exactly that same way. So that's what I think it changed for me.
Yeah. Now tell me a little bit about the school here and what all you do here with Catholic education, a little bit about your background on that.
Sure. So Jesuit High School is an all-boys high school, Catholic high school. It's been around since 1847, so a little over 175 years. Wow. It's in New Orleans, right? So there are a lot of very good Catholic schools in New Orleans. It's one of the best things about the city, I think, is that our Catholic education here in town is really some of the best you're going to find anywhere. Jesuit's a very high-performing school. We have just under 1,250 young men here on average every year. We are grades 8 through 12. And, you know, it's great to be at a place where you know there's always going to be a lot of hard work to do, right? Sure. So every year you get a new crop of young guys walk in the door, and they don't deserve a diploma, right? They're not ready, they're not finished. You have so much work to do. But year after year, we are able to get young guys to go from fresh in the door and having everything in the world to learn, and then walking out the door where we're very, very proud of what they've become, where they really understand what God is calling them to, where they have built up the will to be able to carry that out. And it's just amazing to see. It's great to be part of that, and to be part of what parents are doing to raise their children. To even play a role in that is a pretty privileged thing, you know.
What stands out to you the most about being a Catholic educator here? I mean, what have you learned about being an educator?
Well, okay, so I've learned everything, right? So everything I know I had to learn, right? So, you know, this is not a vocation that I thought was going to be part of my vocation as a Jesuit. I joined the Jesuits only because I just felt God calling me to the Jesuits. I had no intention of ever working in a high school. I really didn't think that I would be any good at it. I didn't think that this would be my, you know, where they would ask me to serve. But they've asked me to serve here longer than they've asked me to serve anywhere else. So I'm very happy for that opportunity. But, you know, what have I learned? For me, I've learned that we've got to fight the good fight, right? We've got to fight the good fight. And Jesuit High School is a place that has been fighting the good fight, preserving all the good things, being careful not to buy into all the bad things, and watching secondary education in most places do its best to imitate higher education. And for Jesuit High School here to say, no, our job is to prepare you for higher education. And in many cases, that means armoring young men up to be able to defend their own faith, to believe in God, to believe what God has called them to be able to excel, to recognize and see God in all of the things that they're going to learn, rather than say that, you know, the more I learn, the less I believe, for Jesuits especially. Notice the more you learn, the more you're glorifying God, right? The more you're becoming that man that God made you to be. So we see our role here in this process as a very, very important role.
What is it like being a Catholic here in New Orleans? Do you get a whole lot of hostility? Do you get a lot of nasty looks when you go out with the clerical collar? I mean, what is it like?
Yeah, not in New Orleans. So New Orleans is a very Catholic city, right? It's a very Catholic city. I want to say it's just slightly, I haven't looked at the statistics recently, but I believe it's near 50% Catholic as a city. So it's got a very Catholic history. I mean, think about it. Our NFL team, it's the New Orleans Saints, right? Yeah. Our NBA team, it's the Pelicans, which is a symbol of Jesus, right? It's on the state flag. The pelican is on the state flag. The bishop here in town is as important a figure for this city as the mayor, as anybody else. And so this city is very warm to what Catholics believe and how we practice, right? Maybe our biggest holiday is a holiday that wouldn't exist if it weren't for our faith, right? Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras doesn't exist unless you have Lent, right? And Lent, we don't have Lent unless we have Easter. So there's this city is very warm to Catholicism, very understanding of Catholicism. In fact, I think most people are proud of it. At the same time, it exists right next to a lot of things that you might have a hard time understanding how it's religious, right? There's a lot of debauchery here, right? People go to New Orleans to have a really good time. And I think Catholics can do that. Catholics can have a really good time, but also we'll be there on Wednesday getting those ashes on our foreheads. You know, we're still a very Catholic city for sure.
Yeah, and I imagine there's a lot of spiritual warfare here. You know, I'm reminded of something, and I was reminded of it when you mentioned the bishop here. I think the Archbishop is Amen, right?
Archbishop Gregory Amen, yeah.
You know, one thing I really appreciated about him, aside from the homilies I've heard him preach, one thing I've really appreciated about him is whenever there was this issue of somebody desecrating an altar in a horrible way, I won't even go into the details, but it was bad, and to me it certainly seemed like there was some spiritual issues going on there. The first thing he did was, I think he may have destroyed the altar and put in a new altar and did an exorcism.
So he did a number of things like that, and I'll tell you from my side, he asked every parish church everywhere to end every Mass with a prayer to St. Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle, right? So he understands there really is, we are fighting real forces out there that need our attention, need our awareness. We have to be on guard for these kinds of things. So New Orleans for a long time has been a real melting pot of all kinds of cultures, and so things like voodoo and that's also a very present thing out here. And so I think the bishop understands that, and he wants to see his Catholics maintain their faith and fight hard.
What is that like though? Because what I often see, especially here in New Orleans with voodoo, is people who practice voodoo tend to also mix in Catholic elements with it. What's going on with that?
I think that's what voodoo is, right? So voodoo is sort of this, so they call it syncretism, right? So you are practicing a faith and practicing something which is contrary to the faith at the same time. Things that shouldn't fit, you're sort of just going with the flow and doing both at the same time. And so a lot of the Haitian spirit worship, all that sort of thing, has combined and taken on the forms of a lot of Catholic piety. So, there's a different saint for every time that you're playing cards, or you're going to smoke a cigar, or you're going to drink a lot of liquor, or you're going to do something. There are these different saints that you might involve in all these ways of often about becoming more powerful. Right? Often about making more money somehow, making someone fall in love with you. Often it involves those things, but you're invoking some spirit under the guise of a Catholic saint very often. But at the same time, New Orleans, in January of 1815, there was the Battle of New Orleans, right, where Andrew Jackson comes down here to defend against the Brits, to defend the city against the Brits. And I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's something like the Brits suffered 2,000 casualties, and the Americans suffered 2. So, it may be the most lopsided victory in the history of the world, as far as I know. And what you had here was you had people who were invoking our Blessed Mother, people who were asking for her protection. And it sure appears like she delivered, right? Also, there was a big fire here in New Orleans once, and we had a bunch of nuns, the Ursuline convent, praying that the fire not touch their convent. Sure enough, it stopped right there before it got to the convent. And so we often, in every rosary around here, you'll hear people pray through the intercession of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, right? Prompt Succor, coming to our aid quickly, right? And so that's a very present thing. You'll see images of Our Lady everywhere that you go. And then also in the countryside, as soon as you get out of New Orleans, you're into more of the Cajun country part of the state, right? In the southern part of the state of Louisiana. The farther north you go, the less so. But in South Louisiana, it's still very Catholic. And so it is extremely common to see people have statues of Mary in their front yard, and so sometimes they call her Our Lady of the Bathtub, because they'll take a bathtub and turn it up, stand it up, and bury it halfway, so it makes this natural little shrine, to our Blessed Mother. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful devotion.
That's great. Given that there's a lot of spiritual warfare here and syncretism and things like that, have you ever had to deal with spiritual issues directly? Have you ever witnessed anything like that?
Yes. I like to be very careful not to talk much about those sorts of things, right? I think that it's so easy to sensationalize. It's so easy for people to get caught up in the the spooky part of it, or the part of it that is supernatural, that they miss the fact that every single day you turn on your television, you are in for a battle, right? Every single time and for many people, every time you open your Bible and you read a verse and you don't recognize in that verse that you stand before God in need of His grace, if you're reading Scripture as a way to get at your enemy, or you're reading Scripture as a way to be able to beat your own chest in pride rather than in contrition, those kinds of things are, I think, what deserve our attention. When we're talking about the kind of spiritual warfare stuff that is a lot more supernatural on the surface, it brings all those things up to the surface, that in some ways makes it a lot more, it should make it more boring, right? Because you're able to see, what is a spiritual reality for all of us. Now you can see it on the surface. And so I usually won't even discuss those kinds of things, only because I think that it's so easy to get sensationalized. It's so easy to sensationalize something and miss the real point. That you should go to church on Sundays, that you should say your prayers on your knees before you go to bed, that you should go to confession. Those are the things that you should be doing.
Well, let's shift then from demons. Let's shift from demons to aliens.
Demons to aliens.
I want to know. For a lot of people, there is no shift there, right?
Right.
But that's part of the discussion. I want to know your thoughts on aliens.
Okay, my thoughts on aliens. So I think it's a complex topic, right? And often people are talking past each other when they discuss these things. But there's not often a lot of good, solid logic applied to the question, right? You'll hear people say things like, how can you have 1 trillion planets out there? And it's pride to think that this is the only planet that has life on it. Like, well, that's not how you do statistics, right? You don't say, well, how many planets are there out there? They must have life. That's not true. They don't have to have life. A good example of this is there are 300 million Americans. I'm the only one who has my Social Security number. Out of 300 million Americans, I'm the only one with my Social Security number. So yes, it is possible that this planet is the only one that has life as we know it on it. Now, it's also possible that there is life on other planets. I don't know. There's a lot. First of all, let's take into account there's a lot that we're never going to know. So if you let's take it for granted that the world was created in something like a Big Bang, right? So you have all of this matter moving apart. So if anything moving in this direction is going faster than half the speed of light, and anything moving in this direction is going faster than half the speed of light, this side will never see that side. So things on the other side of that Big Bang we'll never see. We'll only see a very small sliver, and that sliver keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? As things are spreading through the universe, the observable universe keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So unless we know some kind of way to travel faster than light, and we don't, right? We have not figured out how to do it. Unless you're talking about maybe like bending space and time, you'd need the power of a sun to be able to do it. And anybody in the middle of that kind of transition, it probably wouldn't be good for them physically, right? So there's the visible, observable world is getting smaller and smaller. We're getting farther and farther away from other things, right? Okay, so there's that thing to take into account. Then you have to take into account of what we can see and all that. How many of those planets could support life as we know it, right? Life as we know it meaning carbon-based, liquid water, that sort of thing, right? Well, there's a whole lot fewer of those planets. And so now you're not saying, well, but a fraction of a million is still a good number. But it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, because not only does it have to have water, you've got to not be have your atmosphere stripped from you by solar winds and all these things. You need an atmosphere. You probably need something that's going to keep the radiation that's out there from completely destroying your planet. It probably needs to spin so that you don't have one side completely cooked by the heat of the sun and the other side totally frozen. You have all of these different conditions that it is very, I think, better than 50% chance that this is the only planet that we'll ever be able to see that has the kind of conditions that would be absolutely necessary for life to even make it on the planet. Then you have questions about, well, how would life even begin? Because if you talk to a geologist about what the Earth has looked like over its lifespan, the Earth has not looked like the kind of place that life could spontaneously come into being, right? We don't even know how life could spontaneously come into being. Like, we can throw all the right chemicals into a soup and mix it up, but it just doesn't seem to work. We can't reproduce that. So, was it just by chance that we have life? Maybe it was, but that it happened by chance on all these other planets. It just keeps getting a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller chance, to the point where it's I think the chances are actually bad that we would have life anywhere within our observable universe except for here. Then you have questions of, well, on this planet, how many different species of animals have ever said, I'd like to go to some other planet, right? So far, it's just us. So far, it's just us. We have lots of animals that are bipedal. We have lots of animals that have eyes that can sense light, and ears that can deal with sound, and we have all kinds of different sort of mechanisms that keep life going, that seem to have evolved multiple times over, right? But the desire to go anywhere but this planet seems to only be us. Okay, now, what's the odds that on one of these other planets that might have life and they have the desire to go somewhere else, that they are like made of meat, and got into a spaceship and traveled here, instead of did what we do, which is build a robotic probe that can go somewhere else. Like, it seems to me the first kind of aliens we're ever going to run into, if we ever going to run into aliens, will be robots. Because robots can survive in outer space for a long, long time. They don't go through life cycles. They don't go through all that. Robots could potentially make it from some other planet to this one. But that's not what people say they see with all the UAPs, right? The unidentifiable area phenomenon, whatever, it looks too much like us. It's some kind of meaty animal that's in a metallic vehicle that kind of behaves the way our jet airplanes act, right? So it's much better. They maneuver, they do all these different things. But like, as soon as our jets chase one of them down and fire upon it, it seems to fire back, or it runs away, or it acts a lot of the ways that you would think we would act if we were to do this, which seems to me like, there are way too many other things that ought to happen first, right? So where are the big space spiders? Like, where are they? Instead it's little gray tiny men with big eyes that just look a lot like us. And I think that the odds of other planets having life that looks so much like us and act so much like us, but somehow found a way to come to this planet, and they're playing cat and mouse the whole time. So they get here and all they do is play cat and mouse, and all we have is blurry pictures. Like, in the end, I just think there are too many other explanations for what people are seeing. I'm sorry to be disappointing like that.
No, this is
as a
great.
Jesuit, of course, I'm going to say there's no aliens, but I think there's no aliens, right? Or at least we haven't seen them. We haven't seen any aliens. I think the Fermi paradox is a very important thing to look at. Like, there should be much older civilizations having made their way out here, and they just haven't. No, we have no sign of them that we can really point to, except for very recently, a bunch of difficult to describe phenomena.
Well, speaking of these phenomena that are pretty difficult to describe, one of them is the Tic Tac video. Have you seen this?
I've seen some videos now. They say that by the time they get to us, they've been blurred and they've been everything else. But it's when you're looking at a Tic Tac, it's real hard to say, these are extraterrestrial aliens. Yeah.
Sure. But you do have multiple people who are eyewitnesses to these things, that they describe what they saw, and it's corroborated by the video footage, and they say, look, there's just nothing that we have that can do this kind of stuff. What do you think about that?
I think that that's a very clear, truthful thing to say, is we're seeing some things we don't understand. I just think that to conclude that these are aliens from another planet, given all of the conditions that would have to be true for this to be an alien from another planet. I mean, I'm talking about like something like a Martian, right, in the classic sense.
Sure.
Now, could it be a lot of other things that are just as interesting to think about, that are just as wild to think about? Maybe so.
Give me an example.
Could this be some piece of tech that some military has put together that is completely odds? Could this be some different way of manipulating our instruments, or manipulating, what we think we see when we look out there? Could this be could this be, I hate to say a government conspiracy, because I don't want to believe in government conspiracies, but here's the thing, we know that our government has done those sorts of things before, right? They have absolutely gaslighted people to the point of driving them crazy. I mean, you know, Jimmy Akin has done some videos on the way that our government has done these sorts of things, and I think that our government would consider it an advantage to have something like that in their back pocket, to be able to say, look, if we can have everybody believe that maybe it's aliens, anytime we get caught doing something, we can always say, maybe it's aliens, and people will be more likely to believe it if they already think that it's possible, you know. But of course it's possible, I just think it's very unlikely.
But if we or some other government has this kind of high tech, why hasn't that government taken over the world? Because it would seem that this, whatever these vehicles are, you could just drop in, and they're coming in from outer space, you could just drop in anywhere in the world, do your business, and get out before anybody knows.
Well, it seems to me as though our government plays around a lot with things to make sure that it works to our advantage.
You recently had a conversation with a very important person in this area when it comes to observing the heavens, if you will.
Sure.
Are you able to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, I had a long conversation with someone who works in the Vatican Observatory. We talked for about 2.5 hours, and my first question was, okay, aliens, real or not real? And a lot of what I said earlier is built around that conversation, right? It's like, of course, it's possible that there's something like the life as we know it on some other planet. Of course, it's possible, but in the end, we're not asking, is it possible to have life somewhere else? We're asking ourselves, are we looking at little beings piloting some metallic ship through space, acting kind of behaving the way we would behave? That just becomes less and less likely. And not that this man was a complete expert in anything, but he does spend a lot of his time observing what's out there, and he didn't come away any more convinced that we're being visited by aliens from other planets in spaceships.
So he's never seen anything.
No, he's never seen anything that would make him think that we're being visited by
and
aliens.
He professionally observes the heavens.
And he professionally looks out there. Now, what do you say about all those guys who are flying jets and who have seen multiple things like that? I mean, I'm not denying that they saw something that made them say, I cannot identify what I just saw. It's the leap to, it's an alien piloting a ship that I can't go for, right? That's the leap I cannot go for.
Now, when you say you can't go for it, is that just practically, or do you think that this would be contrary to divine revelation and the Catholic faith?
To quote John Paul II, they are all God's children, right? So, listen, there are some very interesting questions about that. Like, what would make a being worthy of baptism or in need of baptism, right? And I think that you'd have to be one of us to be baptized, right? So let's say you find, because there's all kinds of ways of being intelligent, right? So I mentioned, space spiders, right? Space alien spiders out there. Spiders can engineer webs better than I can, right? They can figure some things out. They are more intelligent than I am in some specialized ways, right? So yeah, it's possible that aliens from some very far away place have come here, but the idea that they'd be just like us and that they would even be interested in talking about these things, or that they would be in need of salvation, those are all some pretty big leaps, right? So I'm of the opinion that it would only be those who are like us, those who are sons and daughters of Adam and Eve that would stand in need of salvation and would even have those kinds of religious questions. We have a whole lot of other life forms here on earth that have no business they're not thinking about religion. They're looking down at the food in front of them. They're looking, to where they can go hide from some other threat to them. So I think that religiously speaking, it's an even bigger leap to believe that we would encounter the kinds of beings that would be thinking the kinds of things that make us think about God.
Just hypothetically, let's say they're aliens and they show up to Earth and they proclaim to the entire world their existence, and they say, and look, we created the world. We've been observing y'all, and y'all think that there's this God being out there, and some of y'all are Christians. No, we're going to set the record straight. We're the ones who created the world. We created all you humans. What would you do at that point? Are you going to say, okay, I'm going to rethink the Christian faith? Or are you going to say, no, this is demonic, this is demons, this is...
Well, yeah, so I guess that you're kind of setting out a few pathways of thought, right? One of them would be, this is a deception. This is all a great big plan from the evil one to knock us off our track towards becoming, the kind of people that God made us to be in the beginning. And this is just some deception from the evil one, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's one possibility, and it ought to be investigated. Another would be is just to ask the same question that we ask right now. All you've done is kick the can up the road. Who created you? Who created the world? Our belief in God is not that he is like a super powerful alien out there in outer space. Mm-hmm. Our belief in God is that God is a different kind of thing altogether. In fact, that existence, we can go into all this Thomism stuff, right? But our belief in God is not just like Thor by another name, right? Or Vishnu by another name. It's something else completely. Our God is something else, and it's the uncaused causer. Mm-hmm. So unless these aliens show up and they say we're uncaused, which I'd have a hard time understanding how that could work. Of course, that would have to be investigated and all that. I mean, I don't want to be like so close-minded to think that there wouldn't be some things that we would have to think about if we were ever face-to-face with some beings who said, your religion is baloney, right? Yeah. We would have to think about some things. Yeah. But I also know there's some things that that scenario wouldn't change what I believe about the God who created the universe.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And, there's a lot of people who think that what's going to happen as far as an end times deception is that you're going to have these alien beings who come around, and they're going to proclaim themselves to be the creators of the world, and this is going to be the end time deception of the Antichrist, and so they kind of tie it into eschatology. And what are your thoughts there about end time deception? Do you see a scenario like that happening, or do you think people are way out there?
I don't know, right? I don't know. But it seems to me that there are some very deceptive things already out there right in front of us. Mm-hmm. There's already, atheistic materialism. Mm-hmm. There's already, even amongst real believers, true believers that have adopted some kind of, I know the word modernist gets thrown around a lot, but there are some modernist beliefs that are just as hostile to the truth as any other weird scenario where somebody pops up and gives us a different account for the history of the world or whatever. The Great Deception. I mean, wake up, you're being deceived right now, right? Mm-hmm. Turn on your television and you are being deceived every second of every flicker on that television. Something's coming through that isn't part of the gospel proclamation, mm-hmm. right? So I certainly don't think, it sounds like a lot of hard work for the devil to have to do when he's already winning in much more conventional ways, right? He's already finding, I say winning, he's winning battles here and there. He's already winning battles here and there through much more conventional ways. So,
what do you say, though, to the people who always resort to the claim that it's all demons? So all these UAP, it's really just demons. What do you think about people who just automatically make a beeline to that explanation?
It's complicated, right? It's complicated. Again, I think that when we talk about these unseen things, all of the unseen things, I mean, what we actually see, it's a pretty small set of things, right? We're seeing light bounce off of physical objects, and we're filling in the gaps for a whole lot of stuff that we don't see. Mm-hmm. And the way we fill in those gaps can either be right-minded or wrong-minded. And I think that there are a whole lot of wrong-minded ways to see the world. And a whole lot of ways to be misled, and ways to think of the world that are very damaging to they're harmful to the truth, hostile to the truth. I think that this is where, when we talk about angels and demons, this is the evil spirit, right? This is where this all happens, where I don't need to take those extra steps and say that also that demons are also flying what looks like a tic-tac in the sky. I don't see. That seems like what a waste of resources for the evil spirit. There are too many conventional ways, right? Too many conventional ways that we fall into daily. I sin daily, right? So this is a real thing. That's where the demons are.
Yeah, I think this is something that's often overlooked, because when we talk about demons, yeah, you do have this extraordinary phenomenon, demonic possession, stuff like that, the more sensational stuff. But you also have oppression and obsession and other things that they tend to use more commonly to deceive people. And I think that's often overlooked, because those are things that we're just kind of inundated with every single day. We might not realize that this particular temptation that I'm experiencing might be originating from the evil one. So that's a very common way in which the devil seems to attack us, but we kind of overlook that and go for the more sensational stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The sensational stuff, the stuff that we can maybe think that we have more control over, right? Like if we can just fire a rocket at one of these flying Tic Tacs, we will have defeated the devil, you know? Like, well, it's not that. I don't think that's where it's at, you know? Like I think that the thought, long before anybody ever pulls the trigger on that gun, there's something else going on, that the evil spirit's winning a small battle, you know, that way. So, yeah, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I think it's much more likely that this is government tech somehow misleading our instruments, or the people who think they see things, or whatever. It just seems to me that that's a far more likely scenario than especially an approach that it doesn't seem that throughout all of Scripture, we don't see that sort of approach throughout Scripture, right? We don't quite see those things happening, you know.
So shifting gears here a little bit, Father. So you recently learned the Byzantine liturgy, is that right?
I am in the process of learning the Byzantine liturgy. There's a lot to it. I got to tell you, there's a lot to it. In so many ways, the Roman Rite has prepared me for it, but in so many ways, it has not. So there's a lot to learn. And you know, you never want Mass. You never want to be celebrating Mass, or I never want to be celebrating Mass, thinking about what's the next mechanical move that I have to make. You really want it to be second nature. You want it to be reverently done in a way that feels like home, right? And so I'm getting to that point, and I'm not there yet, but I'm getting to the point.
What are some of the differences that you've noticed?
So it's a strange thing with the Latin Rite. You know, there's a very clear beginning, a very clear movement where things can happen. You know, we even sometimes in the Latin Rite, you know, we ring a bell that gets things started, and everybody knows to stand and begin with the opening hymn. With the Byzantine Rite, I'm noticing like, oh, I've been saying these prayers that feel to me like private prayers. So you know, you're venerating the icons, you're getting vested saying these prayers. And a lot of it is very practical, you know. So you're heating up the water, you're you're doing a number of things. You're cutting the bread, you're doing all these different kind of things. But that, in fact, is part of the greater liturgy. It's a big piece of what's happening. So sometimes it can feel like you get swept up into it. For me, at least, it feels like I'm getting swept up into it. And I look around, and next thing you know, oh, we're a third of the way into the liturgy. So that's new for me.
I can imagine. You know, I'm sure there's numerous insights that you've gleaned from, you know, celebrating the Roman Rite. What are some maybe theological insights that you've learned from the Byzantine liturgy so far? I know you're still new to it, but
well, first of all, the participation of the laity with singing throughout, and not as much call and response as we have in the Latin Rite, was new to me, and it's a beautiful thing, right? It's a very beautiful thing that people are singing in a way that the beauty of the liturgy in some ways depends on the laity. In the Roman Rite, it feels like you need a good priest with some good altar boys, maybe a good MC if it's a big enough Mass, you know, maybe a good deacon. And in the Byzantine Rite, it's like, oh no, everybody's there, and if their participation in it makes it what it is in terms of its beauty, right? In terms of what it's going to be. So that is something to learn from, for me at least, to get used to, and I appreciate it right off the bat. Exactly what's happening there. So I love that.
Is there anything that has stood out the most to you, like this is my favorite part of the liturgy, or?
So it's not going to always be this way, because I'm going to be more and more used to it.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that there are many things that I say in the Roman Rite that are said in the Byzantine Rite in a very slightly different way, which catches me off guard and makes me stop and say, oh, that's what I'm saying right now, ever and forever, you know, instead of now and forever. I mean, there are these different things that are happening that it's like, oh, I see exactly, we're doing the same thing, but it's not the same thing. It's like it's a slightly different, it's got an accent to it, you know. I love the people that I'm around. I love the closeness of the community. It's a smaller community, right? So I can go and I can celebrate Mass somewhere and there can be 1,500 people at that Mass and I may not know a single one of them. Well, I'm going to know every single one of those who attend the Byzantine liturgy because it's just a much smaller group and everybody hangs out afterwards and it's very, very, it's a very community organized, you know, very, very communal in its togetherness, and I like that a lot.
Is it a little difficult shifting from one liturgy to the next and maybe even the same day? Or
So it is for me. I mean, so for myself, I joke all the time. People say, oh, what's your favorite thing about being a priest? And it's like, well, I don't have to go to anybody else's liturgy, right? So like there are certain things I do as a priest that they are the outward sign of an inward sense of seriousness and piety in the Roman Rite. So, for example, you know, just how starched the corporal is, and as I unfolded exactly the same way and folded back exactly the same way. And you know, the prayers that I say as I'm cleaning the vessels, there are all these things that I'm doing and saying that I've gotten so used to doing, and do it to the point where, like, I take my job seriously, right? I take my job as a priest very, very seriously, and I try to do it well. And then in the Byzantine Rite, a lot is going on. So I can be in the middle of something and the deacon will come up and ask for a blessing, you know, in the middle of whatever. And, you know, things are being moved around. And part of it is because I don't know what I'm doing. People are probably just doing things for me and moving stuff around for me half the time. But part of it, too, is because more people are doing more things, I lose control of exactly what's happening. And so there's a little bit of that, me needing to get used to it and see it's like a different style of reverence, right? So I think it's obviously very reverent. What's happening, it's just reverence expressed in a different way, you know?
What are some stark differences that you've noticed there in the way?
Leavened versus unleavened bread is a big difference for a priest, right?
Sure.
When you're going to be handling the body of Christ, and there are certain rules of thumb that I just sort of they're down to the bone in me right now. And then I go to the Byzantine liturgy and I'm having to kind of like reset myself, like, oh yeah, we're about to take all these hosts and put them into the chalice, and then we're going to pour boiling water into the chalice, and then we're going to like these are things that if you tried to do this in the Roman Rite, I would say, would you stop that? You know, like don't do that. You're messing the whole thing up. And so now I'm watching it happen as part of the ritual. So it's a real eye opener to kind of say, oh, you know what? There's more than one way to skin a cat, and this is what we're going to do here. You know, so there are quite a few differences like that. Plus, it's not necessary in the Roman Rite that you chant anything. Maybe I'm self-conscious, but I don't really like my voice very much. So then you hit these parts that have to be chanted, and it's like, okay, well, everybody hang on, because here it comes. I'm not going to, you know, here it comes. You get to listen to the voice that God gave me. You know?
Yeah, and I imagine it gets a little complicated with all the various tones. Have you gone through that yet?
I've looked at, well, I mean, some of them I just know that it's like eight or nine different tones in there, and I imagine that even if I did get to the point where I thought I was doing it right, everyone else would tell me that it's not really right. You know, it's not very good.
So far you've done divine liturgies. What about, have you done daily services like Vespers or Orthros?
I have not, right? So the full-time job that I have right now, it takes up the entire week. As a Roman Catholic priest working in a high school, as the president of a high school. This is a very full-time job, and I have very little free time. In the evenings, I'm rarely free, that sort of thing. It just so worked out that on Sundays, which would normally be kind of like a day off, that I did have a little bit of space there, and I like helping people. Sure. I like if people ask me to help out on a Sunday, I'm happy to help out on a Sunday. I'll often say a Mass late in the evenings on Sundays, so I've got a homily prepared anyway, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to be here in town anyway. So for me, it's filling up some of my free time, right, with ministry. Which I'm very, very happy to do. but it also means that I'm very rarely going to be available during a week, to be able to really and truly fully live out that Byzantine Catholic life that in some ways I'm starting to really desire, right? It's kind of a strange thing. I still feel like if anybody were to talk to me, they'd say, oh, that guy's clearly a Roman Catholic. But there are some Byzantine things that are differences that I noticed that in a very strange way fit me really well, really well,
I imagine you've also probably, not that you didn't have this before, but kind of gained an appreciation for the diversity liturgically in the Catholic Church. I mean, again, I'm pretty sure you already had an appreciation for that.
So I've seen a little bit of everything, right? So I've been serving as a Roman Catholic priest down, for example, down in certain places, certain rural places in Latin America. It wouldn't be uncommon for a chicken to run across the sanctuary in the middle of Mass, right, or something like that, or a dog, or whatever, So I've seen that, and then I've seen somewhere I've celebrated some Masses, and we're talking about Novus Ordo Masses, that someone has come to me after the Mass and said, Father, thank you so much for practicing the old Latin rite. It's so good that you guys are keeping the old Latin rite alive. And I'm like, that was a Novus Ordo Mass. I've been on both ends of what I think is a pretty broad spectrum of Latin rite, Roman rite Masses. So I see that Byzantine rite as falling in there somewhere, right? It falls somewhere in that spectrum, but it's also got a dimension to it that I don't see in the Roman rite. So it's very good.
Well, talking about the Roman rite, have you? I think you have done Latin Masses before. Right?
I've celebrated the what people would call the traditional Latin Mass a few times. Yes. Now these days I don't. These days I don't have permission to do that. But I have in the past.
What was it like whenever you did celebrate those? Did you feel there was a big difference between that and the Novus Ordos that you were?
This is going to be an unpopular take.
Sure.
But no, there wasn't a big difference.
Okay.
I think people. Okay, so first of all, realize this: when the new missal comes out for the Novus Ordo, nearly every priest moves over into that Novus Ordo camp. And for those who didn't care much about liturgy in the first place, who were celebrating that traditional Latin Mass, that Usus Antiquae today, we call it those guys who weren't doing a good job there, just moved over to the Novus Ordo and weren't doing a good job with the Novus Ordo either, right? So the only ones that decided to try to preserve that old rite are going to be people who care a lot about the liturgy. And so that is, I think to this day, I think that's why if you go to a traditional Latin Mass somewhere, you're going to find the priest that's celebrating that is going to be a very serious, liturgically minded man, very serious about it. I don't think it was always that way. I think if you'd go back to 1945, you'd find some Masses that were just as irreverently practiced before, So it can't just be, it's not just the seriousness by which we celebrate these rites that make them different. Because I certainly know Novus Ordo priests who are celebrating Mass just as seriously, just as reverently, just as well. So the real differences that you see here, I don't see as big a difference as a lot of other people see. I've seen some comparisons where they show you on the computer screen, they scratch out everything that changed and they highlighted the handful of lines that stayed the same. I think those are exaggerations. I think those are. I think that there are ways and options that you can use that will leave somebody really believing that there's very little difference between the two. And I'm much more like I'm the type that sees the similarity more than I see the differences, for sure.
Now, I mean, what do you think about, however, the difference between saying the Mass in Latin versus the vernacular? I imagine obviously you've done the Latin Mass, and of course it's going to be in Latin, and then you also do the Novus Ordo. I imagine most of it is in the vernacular,
Most of it is in English, but I've also celebrated it in Spanish. I've also, I've been in places where it was done in Portuguese and in places where it was done in Syriani, and that would be a different rite, an Eastern rite altogether. But yeah, so the language, I guess, is not. What language you're speaking the words in doesn't mean as much to me, at least, in terms of what I'm understanding, what I'm seeing in the Mass. Now, I think that you're going to find some differences all over the place, but I don't see the difference between the Latin and the vernacular being quite so important as some people see it, right? I think that saying Mass with the right English words is pretty good. Now, remember, I was a priest. I was ordained a priest before the most recent English translation. And I think that the newer English translation is a step in the right direction for sure. I think we're saying things much closer to what they say in Latin than before, you know. So, you're going to always find these different personalities. Some people are looking for the differences. I'm finding all the similarities, right? And so that's maybe more to do with my personality than any kind of real serious study. But you know, you hear things too. You'll hear people say, the Novus Ordo completely dropped out all the language about sacrifice, and they talk about a table instead of an altar. That's just not true. Like, I mean, the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory. I mean, these things are all over in the Novus Ordo. I even did like a word search on the new missal for the word altar, and it shows up all over the place. It almost never says table unless it's saying altar table, or it's saying table because that's exactly the words that are in Scripture, right? So it's like, I think there's a lot of myth. There's a lot of myth about how bad the Novus Ordo is, and it's just, I don't think it is. I don't think it's bad at all. It's the Mass that certainly nourished my faith and has kept me Catholic my whole life. I like the Novus Ordo. I think it does a lot of good. Now, I do believe it can be celebrated the wrong way. Yeah. And we've all seen some really bad abuses of the liturgy. And even some things which are not necessarily abuses, but are just bad options, just dumb things to do, even if they aren't, you know, even if it seems like the rubrics might make some room for you to be able to do certain things a certain way, they can be done really, really poorly. And I think that, if anything, I think we should work on having the clergy in the Catholic Church be more aware of what's happening, rather than feel like they just need to kind of play along and do whatever everybody else is doing. I think the right thing to do is to understand what you're doing, and then we would see great improvements in the way that the Novus Ordo is celebrated.
Now, you know what? Some people are going to hear this and they're going to say, but Father, this is because you don't have to attend somebody else's Mass. And yes, you're celebrating the Novus Ordo in a very reverent way. Okay. Yes, you are. But there's other people out there, they're not priests, and they have to attend somebody else's liturgy, and it's not very reverent. So they're going to see the Novus Ordo very differently than you will. What would you say to them?
I feel your pain. I really, really do. Listen, as a Jesuit, you can imagine, and fill in the blanks there, right? You can imagine the kinds of Masses that I've been present for, right? Okay. You can imagine the kinds of things that I've seen. You can imagine the kind of, like, you know, ingenuity that certain priests, employed as they celebrated the Mass. You can imagine. I've seen a whole lot. I've experienced a whole lot. I didn't like it. So all I can say is I think the laity can very kindly and diplomatically encourage their priests to rediscover the beauty of the liturgy and to practice it in a way that everybody can really appreciate. And so, yes, I feel you. Feel free to come to any Mass that I'm saying. I don't think you'll be super disappointed. Maybe, but I don't think so. You know.
Oh, I've been to your Novus Ordo before, and it was excellent. So I can vouch for you. You know, so another question that I have here. I mean, obviously, so you're a Jesuit, and there's a lot of people out there. As soon as they hear that, there's all kinds of stuff that comes to their mind. I don't know when this started. My theory is that perhaps, I think, with maybe Malachi Martin's book on the Jesuits, that's when you start to see a shift in the way that people thought about them. I don't know. That's pure speculation. Maybe not. But when the word Jesuit is dropped, a lot of people, a lot of Catholics, interpret that negatively. They all of a sudden think of certain priests out there. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's a shame. I think it's really a shame. I think that it's unfair. I think that it's counterproductive, right? Maybe that's the biggest thing, is it's counterproductive. Because when you say all Jesuits are terrible, but you're on the same side that I am about all these things, right? You're making it harder for me to be a good Jesuit. You're making it harder for me to, change hearts and minds and to really, win people over for Christ. When I think a lot of times it's just convenient. You need a heel. You need the bad guy in a story. And so you latch on to the Jesuits when, okay, so like first of all, how many Jesuits can you name, right? And I think, most people can name 2 or 3 bad ones. And then they can also name at least as many good ones, right? And by bad and good, I mean, according to the judgment of the person, right? I think there are some people who would say the same problem is from the other direction. They would say, "Oh, have you met those young Jesuits? They're terrible. They're tearing apart the Jesuit order, my favorite order," or something like that. So it's a shame and it's counterproductive. It's really counterproductive. It's not helpful to the good ones especially. So do the same thing that you do for all of the other clergy in the world, right? Support the good ones that you know, and for the ones who aren't so good, I would also say this. Don't forget that even the ones that you don't like because you read something that they tweeted or something like that, right? Or do you still tweet? It's called X now. Do you tweet?
Yeah, I don't know what is it.
I don't even know.
Xing?
Xing, yeah. So I don't even know what it's called anymore. I'm not on Twitter or anything like that. But you read something that a Jesuit said on Twitter, and then you just presume that every other thing they've ever done is a horrible thing in their life, and they're just doing nothing but, sort of herding, shepherding all these sheep straight into hell, And I might very well agree with you that the tweet is bad. I might very well agree with you that the mindset of this Jesuit is bad or whatever. We're probably on the same side about all that. But don't just take the headline that this Jesuit grabbed and then assume that every other part of his life is going to be just as offensive to you and maybe to God or whatever. Like recognize that people are three-dimensional. People are it's just we grab headlines when we do anything that's out of the ordinary. And so I certainly don't want to be judged on the handful of things that I've done that have grabbed the headline one way or the other. So I hope that we would extend that kind of courtesy to everybody.
Let me ask you one more question here about confession.
Sure.
I think I was doing a show or something the other day, and I was talking about how I can imagine priests are really frustrated with penitents who go in there and they give this very, very long explanation of their sin instead of just stating the sin, very clearly, get to the point. They just dance all over the place. Tell me, as a priest, is it frustrating listening to some confessions?
I will tell you, speaking for myself only, I have never felt frustrated in the confessional.
Okay. I
recognize that there is something absolutely special going on in the confessional when someone comes in, and whatever it takes for them to feel right about what they're saying, to be able to get it out and admit what they've done is wrong, to seek reconciliation with God through the ministry of the church, I find that to be so beautiful that I would agree there are more, concise ways to say, what you need to say. Some people could use a brevity coach, whatever, But I'm never frustrated by that. I'm never angry about that. I don't think I've ever been in the confessional and ever been angry at someone who's sincerely sorry for their sins and they want the absolution. I try to put on the heart of Christ in those moments more than any other moment in my life. And so frustration isn't something I experience. Maybe some other priests, but I don't experience frustration that way.
Have you had to turn penitents away in some cases where it was clear there was no sincere remorse, and so you just have to say, look, come back when you actually have some attrition?
Speaking very broadly.
Sure, of course, not asking specifics here, of course.
I'd never want to uncover anyone's sin or anything like that. I've had a number of people come in and confess certain things that were sins, and then say, oh, by the way, there are these other situations in my life that are obviously, clearly sinful. I kind of know they're sinful, but I'm not going to change those things. But I do want you to at least forgive me for these sins over here. And that is a very unsatisfactory way to engage that sacrament, I've had a number of people come in and ask for, and want absolution when they're not Catholic. So I think people see confessions in the movies, people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so they come in looking for a reconciliation with a church that they're not part of and they don't want to be part of. That could be a little awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
But for the most part, confession has been nothing but a wonderful experience for me as one listening to confessions. It gives me chills to even think that God would trust me to be able to listen to those kinds of things.
Any advice for people who are struggling with scrupulosity in their confession?
Okay, so St. Ignatius Loyola has rules for dealing with scruples, and there are a number of them, and they're very good. Everybody should read them, right? They're really, really good. Very, they were written by a man who at one time had suffered from scruples, and also from a man who recognizes that sin is real, and so he's not there just to pet you and say, don't worry, these aren't bad sins. You know, it's not that either. St. Ignatius lays them all out, and I think that that's a great place to start. That would be my advice. Go look up in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, rules for dealing with scruples, and I think that that would be helpful to anybody.
Oh, very, very much. Last question for you, since we're talking about St. Ignatius. Can you maybe summarize Ignatian spirituality for us in a nutshell?
Yeah. So St. Ignatius summarized the spirituality of the church, that came, everything that came before him. So he's in the 16th century, and he's pulling together all of these great resources. And he sees spirituality, at least parts of it, as maybe a kind of a discipline, right? That you can practice certain things that will strengthen those areas in your life that need to be strengthened to be able to serve God the way that God deserves, to be able to hear what God's will is for you in your life. And I think that is maybe the most beautiful thing about St. Ignatius Loyola. I was watching something on YouTube the other day where a couple of Dominican priests, and by the way, I love these Dominicans. In fact, I think I'm going to show up on one of their videos pretty soon. These are really, really good guys, but they were discussing whether or not it was okay to smoke marijuana, right? And they spent most of their time, like very good Dominicans would, discussing the moral, the moral sort of systematic theology surrounding the morality of smoking marijuana. And the whole time I'm sitting there watching this, I'm saying, that's very interesting. I love it. Like I'm watching the video because I'm enjoying it. But also, why not just ask yourself, am I better off smoking marijuana than not smoking marijuana? Like, why would we have to turn this into a question of whether or not, why do we have to turn it into a question of whether or not this could be right or wrong? Let's just ask the question of, is this, of all the choices I have in my life, is smoking pot going to be a better choice than some other choices that I have?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's just, it short circuits the whole conversation. But it also gets to the heart of the conversation. Why would anybody be discerning smoking marijuana? Don't do it, because there's so many better things you could do, right? It's not a question of whether or not you should, whether or not you can, but whether or not there's something better you could be doing instead. And to me, that's a very Ignatian insight, that we should be indifferent to all of our options that are out there, except insofar as they help us glorify God to the utmost. You know, that's what ad maiorem Dei gloriam means, the motto of the Jesuits. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam. For the greater glory of God is the way that it often gets translated. But that ad really means towards, as if you're moving, right? I'm moving towards glorifying God through all of the better options that there are out there. And so to me, that constant, relentless pursuit for God's greater glory is really is a very Ignatian way of looking at the world, and I'm in love with that way of looking at the world.
Any parting words, concluding thoughts, anything that comes to mind that you wanted to sneak in here last minute?
Concluding thoughts, hang in there.
Yeah.
Don't let the turbulent, don't let the waves come over your head. Hang in there. The church has had much worse times than the times we're in now. Stay off of Twitter. Stay away from Twitter.
Or X.
Or X, whatever it's called these days.
Don't X.
Yeah. Really and truly, ask, before you take on the great, evils of the world, begin by asking God to show you those parts of your heart that need to be fixed first, right? I think that is the whole idea of, why are you worried about the log in someone else's, and the splinter in someone else's eye when you have the log in your own eye? Just recognize that God has a lot of work to do on you, and let yourself be healed by God, let yourself be guided by God, and then when your light is shining in all those ways, other people are going to notice, and they're going to be changed by those kinds of things. Don't let things that are absolutely out of your control get you down. And there are a lot of things outside of our control that we're going to read about and hear about and worry about, and we really shouldn't, right? We really should be worried about those things we can control, those things we can affect, and know that we can grow closer to God when we put ourselves to that task.
Brother Brown, it was an honor. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm glad you were here in New Orleans.
Yeah, thanks for letting us do this here. Can you give a blessing to those of us who are watching here?
Yeah, sure. Well, may the blessing of Almighty God come down upon all those who are watching this video. Might they be blessed, protected from all evil, brought to everlasting life through the intercession of all the saints and their guardian angels, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.